Okay, so welcome back. Now let's do an example of calculating a gear ratio. So let's say we have gears A and B, and A is the driven gear, and it has 64 teeth, and B is the driving gear, and it has 16 teeth. So if we wanted to calculate the gear ratio, we're going to take what? The number of teeth on the driven gear and divide it by the number of teeth on the driving gear. And this gives us, now again, we always want to reduce it to lowest terms, always to lowest terms. And so this would be 4/1. And so now how do we say this? Well, we would say that the ratio is 4:1, okay? Or we can write it this way. You'll see ratios written this way, 4:1. And we write that, we read it just left to right, just like that, 4:1. Okay, so that's the 4:1 gear ratio. Okay, and what else? Yeah. So now a couple of things here I want to show you here regarding these ratios. So these are ratios, these are common ratios that we see with automobiles, okay? And what these are, if you don't recognize these, but these are the gear ratios, right? Common gear ratios for a passenger car, okay? So, or typical. So this would be the gear ratio for first gear, second gear, third gear, and reverse. Okay? So what does these gear ratios mean? Well, one, just so you know, so a gear ratio, if you're in first gear, and the gear ratio is this means that the engine needs to turn 3.94 times in order to rotate the axle one time, the drive axle. Okay, so if it's for front wheel drive or rear wheel drive, that's how many times the engine has to turn in order to get the one revolution of the drive shaft. Okay, so that's what that ratio means. So let's say you're in first gear, and this is the ratio you have. So your engine has to do 3.94 revolutions to make one revolution of the drive shaft. So now, what if your drive shaft ratio is 3.72? Well, what does that ratio mean? Well, that ratio means that the drive shaft or axle, the drive shaft has to rotate 3.72 times in order for the wheel to make one revolution. So the drive shaft ratio, if it's 3.72, means that, hey, for every 3.72 revolutions of the drive shaft will turn your wheel one revolution. So if I want to know in first gear, what does that mean for my engine revolutions of my engine? Well, if I'm in first gear, that means what I'm going to have to do is multiply these together. So I'd have to multiply this ratio, right? 3.94 times 3.72. So what does that mean? Well, let's calculate that. So what does this mean? It means that my engine would have to do 14.65 revolutions in order to move my tire one revolution in first gear. Okay? That's what that means. Okay. See you next time.